States' national interest because its nature and actions prevent normal U.S. relations with Arab and Muslim countries and, to a growing degree, the wider international community. And some developments have been going on with Syria. The West hasn't got their regime change as fast as they wanted. So now all of a sudden Qatar, who's been behind a lot of it or most of it the entire time, Saudi Arabia, is coming out right out in the spotlight, along with Turkey, who's been basically pushing this thing the entire time as well. Coming out in the spotlight, no longer a mystery. And it says why Qatar wants to invade Syria. So it says the Emir of Qatar is on a roll. What an entrance at the UN Assembly in New York. The Sheikh called for an Arab coalition of the willing-style invasion of Syria, and no less. In the words of the Emir, it is better for Arab countries themselves to interfere out of their national, humanitarian, political, and military duties and to do what is necessary to stop the bloodshed in Syria. He stressed Arab countries had a military duty to invade. So what he means by Arab countries is the petro-monarchies of the Gulf Counter-Revolution Club, or the GCC, previously known as the Gulf Cooperation Council, with implicit help from Turkey. So is the Emir now preaching an Arab version of the R2P, responsibility to protect doctrine advanced by the three graces of humanitarian intervention, Hillary Clinton, Suzanne Rice, and Samantha Power? Remember, this is one of the other things that were kind of planned as well, as far as getting the regime change and intervention, declaring a humanitarian corridor, i.e. drones. But that article just kind of came out. From September 28th. We have this one, September 26th, that I held on to this article. Can a military coup occur in the GCC countries? We were just talking about this. Earlier this year, an unsuccessful military coup was staged in Qatar against the U.S.-backed Emir Sheikh, according to the Saudi-financed TV channel 2012 in April. Furthermore, a number of high-ranking military officers rose against the Qatari Emir, it added, triggering fierce clashes between some 30 military officers and U.S.-backed royal guards outside the Emir's palace. The coup was foiled following the arrest of the officers involved. American helicopters reportedly transferred the Qatari Emir and his wife to an unknown location. Meanwhile, informed Kuwaiti sources said that mediated recent disputes between Saudi Arabia and Qatar have unveiled a new series of disagreements between the officials of the two Persian Gulf states. In a telephone conversation, the Qatari premier envisioned a definite overthrow of the Saudi regime, saying Qatar will step in if the Al-Qatif and the Al-Sharqiya regions one day, and Saudi Arabia will be disintegrated. Lastly, the Qatari Emir came to power following a U.S.-backed coup against his father in 1995. The U.S. offers tens of millions more in funding for Syria rebels, and Russia is warning foreign aid, saying that it's just prolonging the civil war. So I was covering Iraq recently about how they were trying to get an oil deal going with the Kurds, trying to create a new flag, a new national anthem, and stuff like that. Now it says that Iraq's pushing a two-stage plan that would bring both sides together for talks on political transition that would end the fighting. But the U.S., for its part, does not seem to be on board for the talks, instead pledging tens of millions of dollars in additional funding for the rebel fighters. And when I saw this article, it actually ties in and makes a lot of sense, tying in the Qatari Turkey-backed plan, right? The GCC and that. Syrian rebel backers block arms cash until bickering factions unite. So I've been covering about the recent rebel leader of the Free Syrian Army actually defecting back to the Syrian government forces. So, and there's been a lot of split between these jihadists and extremists that are getting in with this normal, I guess you call it, rebel army. And now they're kind of split, kind of like the militias in Libya. But it says stockpiles of arms, including anti-aircraft, anti-tank missiles, are being held in Turkey, where most of it's coming from over the border, for use by rebels in Syria's civil war, but their distribution is being held up because of disunity and feuding between the different groups of fighters. Independent has learned out of the UK. Says here in a high-level discussions, Qatari and Turkish suppliers told opposition representatives that heavy weapons would not be available until the various factions agreed to form a coherent command structure. Just recently, I remember the Free Syrian Army, the transitional government, for what they're fighting for, as far as the regime change goes after they get Assad out of there, was based in Turkey, and then they moved it recently to Syria, inside Syria, which is a show of confidence. But also you had France saying, what, you need to form a government. And then the rebels started to actually hold a kind of an ad hoc political meeting and stuff like that to form a government. So, but yeah, Qatar and Turkey say they need to form a structured military council and come up with coordinated operational plans. The U.S. and Gulf countries seek an advanced missile defense plan. So him and the U.S. and his Gulf partners are looking to deepen cooperation on missile defense as tensions rise with Iran. Look at this. It says Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State of the U.S., met with the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC. They just keep popping up all of a sudden, don't they? Officials in New York as Washington seeks to boost regional defenses against perceived Iranian threats. So like I said, Turkey's playing a dangerous game. You have Webster Tarpley, the analyst, saying Turkey involved in a no-win Syria project. We had Turkish foreign minister here this week in the United Nations. He doesn't seem to understand that he's embarked on a no-win project to the extent that the Turks insist on destabilizing Syria, the necessary, almost mechanical consequences that the Kurds would be encouraged to destabilize Turkey. Tarpley said the best advice to Turkey is, you've built a great nation, you should save it. Don't go any further down this road. According to the analyst, there are two dangerous issues resulting from the recent talks in the United Nations. The first, Tarpley says, is a proposal by the Qatari's Crown Prince Sheikh to have an Arab League invasion of Syria. The second is a French proposal calling for some kind of humanitarian corridor or safe zone, which would mean, again, invading Syria and trying to take over sovereign territory of Syria. I saw this article kind of stuck out. It's from September 27th. Turkey's Erdogan slams Russia, China, Iran over Syria. He lashed out at Russia, China, and Iran on Thursday, saying their stance on the crisis in neighboring Syria was allowing a massacre to go unabated. So yeah, kind of interesting. He accused Syria's Assad of creating a terrorist state, allowing the Syrian opposition to organize on Turkish soil. That's right, the rebels and the terrorists and that, they would go and fight in Syria, kill some government forces and some civilians, and then they would go back over the border to regroup and rest and recruit others. And then pushing, this is what Turkey was doing. Turkey was also pushing for a foreign protected safe zone inside Syria, i.e. a humanitarian corridor, which is backed by France, i.e. like I said, they're going to have drones basically surveilling. This is interesting. They say, Turkey says the main source of disappointment is Russia. And China stands by Russia. And then, of course, dragging Iran into, well, you know, Iran is pretty self-explanatory. The goal to bring down Syria and the regime change is directly related to Iran. And then you have Russia, though, right? Russia will not grant asylum to Syrian President Lavrov. So we have right here, no, we won't grant him asylum. Also, we will not tell him to go. He says this will be his decision if he steps down. So what they're doing now is with Syria, and this is someone in the comment board made a pretty good observation as far as when I covered this last time, which is it's pretty obvious where Russia was doing with this when this came out September 27th, which is ultimately with Syria it's directed towards Iran and Russia, right? And with Turkey, like I said, they create a little Kurdistan proxy state. They can use that as a kind of a corridor to send terrorists and that from North Africa onto Russia's doorstep. So I guess Russia, the way they see it, is it's inevitable what's going to happen here in Syria as far as regime change goes. But you can see how they're being kind of hooked into this now. And this is the icing on the cake, right, as far as making my point. Russia, this is coming out of the Times of Israel, just over this Monday, over this weekend, Russia told Assad to shoot down Turkish plane and murder captured pilots, leaked Syrian documents show. So I don't believe that whatsoever. But what you could see what they're doing. They're trying to say that Russia is pulling Syria's strings. So this is a Turkish jet that flew into sovereign airspace. And the Syrian government apologized and said, actually, we're surprised it was even shot down. I guess it was automatic surface to air, and they shot it down with machine guns. But Russia is saying our role in downing the Turkish jet in Syria is fantasy and nonsense. So Russia's statement basically said, it is ridiculous even to comment on this nonsense, but unfortunately we have to. This came from a Saudi-owned news channel, Al Arabia. And this is something I think we all pretty much understand. The U.S. delisted the MKO, the MEK, or the Mujahideen to use it against Iran, says the Iranian military. It says that it was used to create insecurity and acts of sabotage in border areas of Iran and other regions. Iran also said they're going to hold U.S. and MKO accountable for any future crimes against the nation in any part of the world. And this is something I never even heard of in the news at all, Western media. Assault on Iranian diplomat, premeditated plot. A senior Iranian diplomat has slammed the recent assault against Iran's foreign minister in New York as a premeditated plot. By who? By the MKO. It says here the MKO